Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, along with my co-host, John Barker, that's off to the left. And in between us is Stephen Owens from the 74th District, which would be Heston, and like you always like to say, and good part of the free world.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. That's us.
Well, thank you guys for coming in. I know Certainly. The legislature just ended for today, and you guys coming in. And John always comes in on Friday and brings us up to date with what's going on in the legislature, and he always brings in a good guest, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, I appreciate him calling me a good guest. I'll look forward to honoring that.
Well, that's awesome. What do you do in Heston?
So I'm a business owner. I own a couple of different businesses in different industries. I'm what you'd call a serial entrepreneur. My wife and I have been in Heston for 25 years now. I've raised 3 kids there. 2 of our daughters are both now married, and we have a 17-year-old son at home. So you can imagine we don't leave him at home alone very often.
Well, we were 17, so we know.
That's right.
And thank you for bringing Rose out here. She's sitting in the director's chair, and she's watching us. She's not on screen.
She's keeping us in line.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I was looking at what all you're involved in, and the corrections. What committees are you on?
Yeah, so I am really blessed to be able to take over as chairman of the Corrections Juvenile Justice Committee this year. So all things juvenile justice and correction system related. So a great committee to be part of as we figure out how to be a little bit smarter on crime. So I serve on that. I also serve on Judiciary, having a couple of judges around me. You guys understand what the Judiciary is about, serve on that, as well as Appropriations Committee. So I get to discuss on a regular basis how we're going to spend your tax money.
Good. How many years have you been in the legislature?
This is my 4th session, so 2nd term.
Oh, that's awesome. That's excellent. I appreciate that people get some time in the legislature, and it just really helps because there's a lot to learn.
Oh, there's a lot to learn, and you know it's been an amazing ride. I look forward to continuing to serve to the extent that my constituents will have me. I remind people at the end of the day we're all there to move Kansas forward.
Yeah.
Might have different perspectives on how to get there, but everybody's there working for their constituents.
That's good. I appreciate that, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
John, this past week, what has happened?
Oh, we've had an interesting week. In fact, Stephen was on appropriations this morning, and I had a Fed and State meeting. But, at the beginning of the week, the governor vetoed our redistricting plan for the congressional districts. So the Senate on Monday took that up on a motion to override the governor. They couldn't get it done on Monday, so they took it up Tuesday, and they got the sufficient votes necessary, and then so they overrode it. Then they sent it over to the House, and we read it in, and Wednesday morning we took it up on a motion to override. We were able to accomplish that. We had 85 votes. Unfortunately, it was all bipartisan. It was not bipartisan, it was partisan. All the Democrats voted, and one Republican voted with the minority, and then all the other Democrats, all the other Republicans, we had our votes, and we were successful. So then now it goes to the federal courts as soon as a lawsuit, and we know a lawsuit will be filed by some Democratic organization, and then the 3-judge panel will look at it and determine whether we did the right thing, and we think we did, because the deviations was 0 deviations. We had definable borders, like in Wyandotte County, it's I-70. If you're north of I-70, you're in one district, and if you're south of I-70, you're on another district. So that was good. So we're going to do that. We did some other floor actions this week. We had House Concurrent Resolution 5023, which had to do with, if you remember last year when we had the big freeze and gas prices were gouging us. Mm-hmm. City of Marion, of course, spent their whole annual budget in 1 month. And so we passed a resolution that to encourage the Attorney General, who's presently investigating that, and to prosecute any person or company engaged in a price gouging during that storm. So that was positive. We also passed a encouraging help for Kansas with disabilities, what we call the ABLE Act. It's a federal act which allows disabled people to keep a certain amount of money and not lose their benefits. The federal government isn't possibly changing the age limits on that. from 26 to 46. If they do that, we just wanted to make sure our statutes comply with the federals. And then, of course, Stephen knows we spent some time on the Apex bill, which is an eco-devo bill that the governor introduced, or her staff introduced. It went to the Senate. It was not scrutinized very well over there, and they sent it to the House, so we spent a lot of time on that. And it's a big deal. It's $1.3 billion. And and I wouldn't talk about the substance of it, but I think we did a good job. We put a legislative oversight in it, which is the Finance Council. We cut some of the benefits for the companies, but this is not for one company. This is a structure, an apparatus for other companies, so we can attract large corporations to come to Kansas, because presently they're going to Texas and a number of other states that already have this in place. So now we will have it in place.
Okay, I want to come back to that when we come back out of break. Watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm Doug Thompson. My co-host John Barker. In between us is Stephen Owens from the 74th District out of Heston. And John, let's go back to that Apex a little bit, because I read some of that in the paper about a lot of money being involved. And what's the purpose of it?
Well, the purpose is it will give tax breaks to corporations who bring in their business and create jobs here in the state of Kansas. The one that was proposed is going to bring 4,000 jobs, and they're high-paying jobs, which is important. But when the governor proposed the bill, it was, in my opinion, it was a train wreck, and I was not going to vote for it. When the Senate passed it out of the Senate, I still thought it was a train wreck. Again, I decided, and I was not sure how I was going to vote on it. Fortunately, our Commerce Committee did a great job. They put in a lot of oversight, and the capital investment tax credit was restored, and it went, initially it was 3 years, now it's 10 years. If the project requires a shorter amount of time for payout, the Finance Council, which is the legislature, the Legislative Finance Council, to include some senators, can change that. And we have a clawback, which if they leave the state within 15 years, we can claw back the entire state investment.
I see.
But it gives the Department of Commerce and the Secretary of the Department of Commerce a way to go out and negotiate. It may not be this business we're talking about. We understand we're in competition with the state of Oklahoma over it. But if we lose this business, at least we have the statute in place which would allow the Secretary of Commerce to go out and negotiate with other businesses to bring them in. And it may not be as large as this one. The problem that a lot of the members had is that we don't know the organization. It was secret, but that's not uncommon in these type of deals, that the corporation does not want its name to be out there. And in fact, the people who do know had to sign a non-disclosure statement to not disclose that. So that made some members, and it was an interesting bill. There's not a blame game here. The Republicans who voted against it, it was fine with me. Those who voted for it, that's good. I happened to vote for it, and I went home that evening and told my wife, I said, I've either made the best vote or the worst vote. And I won't know for 10 years or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so we just wanted to give the state the ability to go out and bring in some of these large corporations. So hopefully it will work. We have enough safeguards in it, especially with the legislative oversight. I think it's a good deal, but I won't know for 5 years.
No, but you do know this part about it is if you don't have the incentive program, they're not going to come to your state. I'm guessing because there's other states that are offering it.
And the state doesn't have the ability, the governor signed this, right. And they've had a finance council yesterday, and I understand the Secretary of Commerce has made the offer to this company today, and he thinks it'll take a month or so before they respond back.
Yay or nay, huh?
Yay or nay, but now at least in the future, he can make that proposals to companies, and so I would like to see, to be like Texas, where all these corporations are leaving California and
right.
New York, moving to to Texas, and they have it in place. They can offer these incentives.
Well, as long as they leave their politics in New York and California, we'll agree with that.
And I think that's what the governor of Abbott, the governor of Texas, tells them. Said, you bring your business, but leave your politics.
Leave your politics. It is one of the challenges with a deal like this. As much of a free market guy as I am, I wish incentive packages like this didn't even have to exist.
Right.
The sad truth is every state around us offers them, and if we're going to be competitive at all, we have to do the same thing. So following the lead of our leadership and really putting some safeguards around that bill to make sure we have the clawbacks in place to make sure that we're not bankrupting the state as we do this. It's a lot of good work by our Commerce and by the members of the legislature.
It's nice to do this, but down the road, hopefully, we can be much like Texas and bring those California companies to Kansas, and with the understanding they leave their California politics in California.
Amen. That's what
when
we
they
like.
cross the border, they
that's a requirement.
That's
a requirement. That's
Okay.
right.
But I know Stephen's been busy on a number of things on juvenile justice. But
What have you been doing on juvenile justice this term here?
Taking a look at some of the corrections related items, we talked off camera about the fact that our prison population is actually manageable right now. We're down about 2,000 inmates in our prison population, but while it's pandemic related, it's not like we just let these people go. What it has to do with is the overabundance of people currently in our jails because they haven't had trials. The courts have been at a standstill and are just now picking up the pace to get back in there. So, it's an opportunity for us to kind of at least take a bit of a deep breath and say, okay, at least our prisons aren't overcrowded, but allow us to make some decisions that prepare us for what's to come, which is going to be a lot of cases. And how do we get a little bit smarter about how we deal with some of these people? I talk about addiction a lot and how addiction drives just the vast majority of crime in society today. And so to be effective in fighting crime, we've got to be effective at treating people and giving them options to get off. And so last year, and we're starting to see the implementation of it this year, we passed House Bill 2026, which created a state paid for substance use treatment program for defendants that get on diversion. Okay, we always had one after you got a felony and had that felony, then you could get treatment. Well, we created a system where now you can actually, as soon as you're getting involved in the system, if you meet the criteria, get the treatment that you need, which is so much cheaper than putting somebody in prison.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I want to come back to it as we're going to cut away to break, and then I want to go back to that because
Certainly.
That's very interesting. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My co-host, John Barker, is on the left on the screen. In between is Stephen Owens from the 74th District, which is Heston. And Stephen, we were talking off camera a little bit about the correction system, and what did you want to share?
Yeah, as I was looking through some of the bills that we've passed out, another one that goes along those same lines of drug addiction and making sure we're getting to the root of addiction and then rewarding people who have chosen to change their life. We passed out House Bill 2515. I'm sure you gentlemen realize, but many people don't know that we not only have a sexual offender registry, we have a violent offender registry, and we're the only state in the nation that has a drug offender registry. Okay, so people that fit in a certain box that can convicted of a drug crime get put on this civil registry for 15 years post release of their conviction. And so these people still have to register every 3 months wherever they're at, their work, their school. And what we've realized over time is that there was a time and a place for that. But if somebody has truly cleaned up their life, they've changed their ways, they're trying to make good in this world, to pay their bills, to take care of their family, having to carry that burden for 15 years may not make sense. Right. And so what we passed out of committee just this week is what we call an off-ramp. It allows an individual who's been through treatment, who has a 5-year track record of doing the right things, of handling his business, of being a productive member of society, to come back and to petition the judge and say, Your Honor, here's all the things I've done. I've got my life back on straight. Can I please be let off this registry? If the judge agrees to do that, then he would also have the opportunity to have that expunged at the same time. Because if you're on a registry, you can't have your criminal history expunged either. So trying to take one step in the right direction. You know, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that these registries aren't as effective as we think, but I think it speaks volumes that Kansas is the only one with a drug registry, and allowing people to move past that addiction is a real important thing.
Is there still a fee attached every time?
There are, every quarter.
You know, every quarter they have to pay an additional fee.
Yeah, and then if they fail to register,
that's another crime.
That's a crime.
That's right.
So you're going from criminal to civil back to criminal if somebody messes up. So you know what? If they mess up, if they're not taking it seriously, then they don't get off. It's all up to judicial discretion. I personally happen to believe in my judges and think that they're going to make good decisions.
Well, we're glad that you think that way.
I kind of thought you might like that. You know, another thing that we're working on, I might mention that we passed out of Judiciary, or excuse me, out of Corrections as well, is House Bill 2200. We passed about 5 years ago SB 367, which is a complete juvenile justice reform package. And while that has done a lot of really great things for the youth in our state, we have heard from judges, law enforcement, district attorneys for the last couple years that there's this group of offenders that are kind of at the top that really aren't getting what they need. And they don't have any way to actually hold these kids accountable for the decisions they're making because the law is written as such to where you have very specific case length limits, very specific probation length limits, and very specific incarceration length limits. So we went back into that bill and we extended or allowed the judges, again, to extend some of those limits of probation case length, extend some of those incarceration limits, and then also added some penalties in there for offenders or for these youth that just aren't getting it, or they're refusing to do what the court says, right? The idea is, and what we have seen is the vast majority go through these evidence-based programs and do remarkably well with them. But there are those youth that are just obstinate.
Right, and these are the violent offenders.
That's right.
And that's what we need to secure. The public needs to know that we're at least taking them off the street for a period of time. Yeah,
you know, we've seen an uptick in violent offenses by our youth here in the last couple of years. And so I think that this is something that we can do that will help turn that tide back, that will give the judges a little bit more teeth when they have a youth that comes in and just refuses to do what they're told. Now, under this bill, they'll have the ability to incarcerate them for a short period of time.
Good.
And when you're talking about that, Stephen, what you're saying up here is for the kid that's doing really well, that's kind of turned it around, they have the opportunity to go in and say, look, here's what I'm doing, here's where I'm working, here's what I'm involved in, and have that considered to get them off of that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole goal in the juvenile justice reform that we did, that whole goal is for kids to change their ways. It's evidence-based programs to help them see things differently and to approach things differently and become educated. Because sadly enough, we know many of the youth that are in our correction system didn't come from two-parent households. They don't have that parenting that many other kids had, and so unfortunately it puts the court in a position to have to make some of those decisions for them.
Yeah, and what John always used to say in the court when he was on the bench, why he would say that, you know, people mature at different ages.
They do.
And so somebody who makes some mistakes right here may turn out to be a model citizen down the road, and somebody else who's been going through the system in a minor way all of a sudden just falls off the cliff.
Yeah.
And then they, you know, you hope that they get back on their feet and goes from there.
You're absolutely right. You've got to have tools in the toolbox, right? And everybody, all of our judges need ample amount of tools to be able to make the best decisions, because really they're the ones that know these youth.
It is, and then when we passed that Reform Act, you know, you took more authority away from the judges. I like to give the judges some discretion.
Right.
And because you're right, we see the juveniles in court. We've seen them several times in court, probably. Yep. And at some point in time, you have to instill in them that this is serious.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And for some kids, it's simply touching that system.
Right.
I can speak firsthand as my son made a decision that wasn't the best decision, and he got to experience juvenile intake. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you, just going through that process, he learned real quick that is not a place he wants to be, and hey, you know what? That's the purpose of it.
Yeah, and that's the way that it works. You know, you stand up there and boy, I'm embarrassed by what I've done, etc. And I don't ever want to be here again.
But we're human, and we all make mistakes. That's what we do afterwards.
And no question about that. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, co-host John Barker. On the left of your screen, in between us, is Stephen Owens from the 74th District, which is Heston. First off, Stephen, thank you so much for coming out.
Absolutely.
And stopping on the way, and we'll put your contact information, will be up on the screen.
Absolutely.
And so if somebody wants to contact you and has questions, and your questions may come in on the juvenile system and suggestions there, and that's great. So the contact information will be up there. As always, we put John's contact information up, and this goes out not only on our system, but it's also goes over to you guys.
Right. Super.
If you got a website, why we'll get it to you, however you want to do it, why we'll put it up and have access to it. And thank you for everything that you do. And John, thank you for coming in on Fridays. I know you worked hard all week. And Rose, thank you for bringing your husband in and letting us talk to him. He's done a good job. We'll see you next time on Legislative Updates. Hope you have enjoyed this segment of Legislative Updates with John Barker. I'm Doug Thompson with special guest John Barker. Tune in next time for another Legislative Update.